Enduro bikes are made to cover a wide variety of terrain and uses, serving as the everyday driver for many consumers riding their local trail network and maybe some bike parks on the weekend, to attacking the gnarliest terrain at EDR World Cups under some of the best athletes in the world. We opted for bike park laps at Snow Summit in Big Bear Lake, California, to get our 6 long-travel bikes as close to the limit as possible in a relatively controlled environment. Our test dives into the initial impressions of each bike, their on-trail performance, what we liked or didn't like, and what kind of rider we think each bike is for. We choose which bike we would take home if we could get one for free in the configuration we tested, and which bike we would buy with the ability to change frame size or any components. In this video, we'll be talking about the Deviate Claymore. If you're looking for a different bike or want to see all the bikes we tested, refer to the main test session video. Hailing from Scotland and named after the incredibly long sword from medieval times, Deviate honors that legacy with a bike that is even longer. Receiving high praise since its launch, we were eager to finally see what the long, low, and slack high pivot bike was all about. The Claymore is built around 165mm of rear wheel travel paired to a 170mm fork, and is offered in a full 29 configuration only, with no flip chips or geometry adjustments to be found. Deviate offers the Claymore with a fully customizable build spec through the bike builder option on their website, or as a frame-only option. This was the most expensive bike in the test, coming in at around $9,675, but that money is put to good use. Our test bike came well spec'd with an Öhlins RXF 38 M2 fork and TTX2 air shock, Shimano XT 4-piston brakes with 200mm rotors front and rear to slow things down, XT 12-speed drivetrain, and Industry 9 Enduro S aluminum wheels to bring everything together. Other nice touches included a 1-up carbon bar and 42mm stem combo, as well as a 240mm 1-up dropper that allowed us all to run the seat nearly slammed and out of the way for descents. Hats off to Deviate for offering such an appropriate spec and allowing customers to put their money where it matters most. The high pivot design utilizes an 18-tooth idler pulley said to keep pedal bob under control and virtually eliminate pedal kickback. The Claymore has a roomy 520mm reach paired to a 64.3-degree head tube angle for a planted front wheel. The rear half of its 1303mm wheelbase is comprised of a 441mm chainstay length with around 21mm of rearward axle movement that is hardly noticeable on trail for such a significant number. Geometry numbers are rounded out by a 78-degree seat tube angle that creates an upright pedaling position with great front and rear wheel traction while climbing. Yeah, the Deviate Claymore seemed to do a really good job of deleting things like small lips. Small lips I basically did not feel, and like landing into rocks you don't feel a lot of that. It just handles high speed compression super well. Super nice build spec. Like, I think this is a really expensive bike, and Öhlins suspension, yeah, is the majority of that, and it works really well.
I thought the suspension felt really good, and I kept waiting for the rear end to feel weird because it's such a high pivot, and maybe I could feel it, right? It was not a major distraction at any point. I didn't hit huge jumps on it, like we did a last lap down the big jumps, and I was on a different bike, so yeah, maybe that would feel weird, but I was just really impressed at how well it carried speed.
Yeah, and that was what worked well in the big jumps. Yeah. It was like when you needed to kind of like generate speed. First run, I thought the rear felt super active, super planted, but you don't really pay for it on the back end when you need to like get up and generate speed. Is a really good combination of like deleting bumps and still generating speed.
Yeah, I think the holy grail with suspension is that you want a spring that absorbs chatter and like absorbs small bumps and like stays active, but you want damping that like gives you a wall to push against so you can hop. And I thought it did a great job. Like, I was just able to hop anywhere, and like the bike felt really light underfoot, but then it was carrying speed over every sort of bump really well. So I thought it did both very well. I don't know if that's the Öhlins stuff, or if that's the rear end of the Deviate, or all of the above.
I feel like it's probably down to something they've figured out with the bike, but yeah, be interesting to try like a coil shock on it or just a different brand shock and see if it behaves the same way. We're either stoked on Olin suspension or we're stoked on the Deviate Claymore.
I would 1,000% size down if I were gonna buy that bike.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I don't know what the large is compared to the extra large, but that's a very long bike. The whole deal is right. Like this is what the manufacturers recommended for us.
Exactly.
Like,
we're like dead in the middle of the size chart.
And I just respectfully disagree. I'm like, yeah, I'll take the one size down, please.
And that's where I was kind of surprised for how big it was. It was still fun.
Yeah, and I still had good front wheel grip, which is what I was super worried about, that I was gonna just like eat it.
I just got off this bike and it's fast. It feels really cool. It took me a minute to get used to the length of it. I still think these longer bikes are a little tricky for my riding style. Like having to remember to stay over the front to keep the fork working. Because they are so long, it's easy to just get off the back and just rattle your hands. The rear shock felt super good. I did almost nothing to it. I think I left it wide open, set my pressure, adjusted my rebound, and it just felt money. This rear end worked so good. Immediately, I was just like plowing through all the little chatter, and like my feet just felt glued to the pedals and super stable.
Did it feel like the axle was moving that way, or did it just feel generally good?
It just felt generally good. It didn't feel that rearward to me. I mean, I did get off the Trek right before that, but it didn't feel like, oh, this rear end is just like dropping super behind me. There was some noise coming from it. I wasn't quite sure what it was. I know you guys were talking about maybe the brake pads. I kind of want to look here at the chainstay. Yeah, see, we're getting some like chain marks here on the chainstay, and there's like no chain protection there.
Oh, up here as well.
Yeah, right on the top there.
So that would be it, yeah.
So maybe
a little bit on the inside.
Yeah, so maybe
rubber, but, yeah.
Maybe some of that noise was just chain clacking. Was kind of playing with the front for a little bit, and I think it was really it's a couple things. Like my tire was flat when I got to the top of the chairlift, so we aired it up, and I wasn't able to like check the proper pressure, so I might have been a little high front tire pressure, combined with like maybe not leaning far enough forward. The front end was and the carbon bars, like the front end was a little bit more chattery than I was hoping for, but it didn't feel like it affected it too much. And every time really that my hands were like starting to get chattery, I was just like, just get forward and just like ride more aggressive, and then it just kind of went away. For being one of the bigger bikes in the test, it never felt tall. And some of the other bikes felt kind of tall for being XLs. And just tall like with your knees and when you're leaning it in the air or you're trying to like recover on an off camber or something like that. It jumps great. It's super long, so it's not the most playful thing in the air or even on the ground. Actually, after riding 10 ply on the Slash, getting on this, I was struggling a bit to like keep the same lines that I was riding on the Slash, but then it almost didn't matter because big wheel, long wheelbase, it was just like, oh, I messed that up, just keep looking straight, and it just didn't lose speed. So like if you mess up your line, you're not like crushing all your speed like maybe you were on some of the other bikes. And so for that, I think it's like a sick race bike because you're gonna make mistakes, especially on an enduro track where you've maybe only pre-ridden the course once and you're sort of riding it blind. Like the reality is you're never gonna have like a perfect run, and so like a bike that can recover really well or that you can even just ride tired, I think is key.
The Claymore surprised us with how lively it felt on trail for being such a high pivot bike with such a significant level of rearward axle movement. It holds speed incredibly well and demands being ridden at a high speed for how much traction is on tap. We all felt a size smaller might be our cup of tea for an even more playful ride, but who is the Square Edge Slayer for? Someone who wants to race enduro for sure. It's kind of, does both things really well. You could take it to a bike park and have fun, and you could take it to a race and feel like it's stable enough to go fast confidently.
I think the bike that they sent us is perfect for me. Well, it's longer than I want. So it would be for if I were smashing bike park laps.
Yeah.
Where it's like lots of holes, lots of pumping, jumping, like lots of different situations, and like pretty good traction. But I think if I were riding weird, sketchy stuff that was slippery, it's like a lot of bike to get around some of the really tight stuff we did.
I think if you maybe are like a privateer and you're serious about racing and you're spending a lot of money to travel somewhere, this bike might be the one that goes fast.
Serious about the long-term durability, because if you think of it as like not a new bike every year but something you could ride for a few years, then it kind of offsets the cost a bit.
Totally.
Versus getting a new bike every year.
We do have a lot of pivots going on under here. Like I would say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of bearings. This bike did have the most grease on it, but it's got a lot of dirt in those linkages, and I would imagine if you don't address that and you just kept riding it, you'd wear out those bearings pretty quickly. I don't know.
I don't know though. It's developed in Scotland, I think, so maybe they know something we don't about keeping all that together. But yeah, certainly a question mark in my head, like what's the durability or what's the service life of that look like, and how easy is it to do?
So
Yeah.
all around, super impressive bike.
Yeah,
Really impressive. I mean, I guess you get what you pay for in that sense.
for sure. Yeah, and if you want an enduro race bike, I think we all agree it's probably the best option for the application. To see how the rest of the test pool stacked up, check out the full enduro bike test session video, or for more details on each specific bike, head over to vitalmtb.com.